Good afternoon once again, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Information Warfare Pavilion in our speaker series. We have one more for this afternoon, and then I will remind you, and the schedules will go up later, there are 3 speakers tomorrow and 3 sets on Thursday. So we're going to keep it busy here in the IW Pavilion. Really happy to have joining us this afternoon Rear Admiral Tracy Hines. She's Deputy Director of Global Space Operations at U.S. Space Command. Those of you that attended this event last year may recognize her. She was on the N2N6 staff at the time, so she managed to escape the confines of D.C. for Colorado and made it out here. She's from Columbus originally. She actually entered the Navy as a limited duty officer before transferring to the information warfare community. She's got a business management degree from American Intercontinental University and a master's in information technology cyber forensics from Trident University. The rest of her bio, like I'm doing with all the others, is way too much for an officer of her caliber for me to sit here and bore you by reading it to you when you can see it for yourself online. So without any further hesitation, Admiral Hines.
All right. Somebody told me I should just come up here and say, space, the final frontier, and drop the mic. Well, one, I don't have a mic in my hand, and I think I probably need to talk a little bit about maybe space and the intersection with information warfare. So first and foremost, Joe, thank you so much. AFCEA, NAVI4, the U.S. Naval Institute, thank you for allowing me this opportunity to be here today. You know, anytime I get a chance to be in San Diego, I'm not going to turn it down, because when you do read my bio, you will see that I spent a lot of time in San Diego. So it's really good to be back on my stomping grounds, where I actually started my career a long time ago. But we're not going to talk about that. Like I said, we're going to talk a little bit about space. Hopefully, I'll shed a little light on what Space Command really is, what's the Space Force, and then, like I said, what's that intersection with information warfare? How does this all fit together? So I promise not to be too long, because I definitely want to hear from you. Everybody always says that, and then we get up here and we talk to the bitter end so that you don't have time for questions. But I am actually going to allow time for questions. And a lot of times people tell me, they ask me the question like, well, what's the captain, what's the doggone admiral doing at Space Command? Well, remember Captain Kirk was a captain, right? And then he made admiral, right? And what did they do? They drove ships, right? Then they referred to the space of the ship. So I'm just saying, I'm in my comfort zone exactly where I should be. So ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests and fellow participants, I stand before you today, like I said, to shed a little light on a crucial and often overlooked aspect of modern warfare: the intricate relationship between information warfare and space operations. In an era where technology is rapidly advancing, we hear that all the time, right? The intersection of information and space has become a pivotal battleground, shaping the landscape of global security and geopolitics. So, as a proud member, as you heard, of Space Command, as the Deputy Director of Operations, I want to tell you about the nation's 11th Combatant Command. So let's clear that up right now. Space Command is a combatant command. Space Force is a service, right? So we got that out the way, because it often comes up, and people ask me, are you going to wear that cool uniform? No, I'm still in the Navy. I will not wear that cool uniform, and I said cool uniform. So I'll tell you, Space Command was originally conceived on September 23rd in 1985. This was the first Space Command which oversaw space-related military activities, including satellite operations, missile warning, and space surveillance, in their mission to protect U.S. national interests in mostly a benign space environment. As time progressed, the security environment would see the first Gulf War occur in 1990. Now I got to compete with that music. Classified by many as our nation's first space war. So considering the critical role played in space, in military operations, particularly with the use of satellite communications, which we're all familiar with, and navigation of U.S. forces. Though the nation would be involved in other seemingly minor conflicts in years following, the next big conflict would come on 9/11 when we had those terrorist attacks. So these attacks would quickly shift and orient the nation's focus on defeating global terrorism. These attacks would also result in the deactivation of the first Space Command in 2002. So, and the mission was actually absorbed by Strat Command. So if you didn't know that happened then. And then what do we do? Well, change is the thing that happens constantly, right? There was a reemergence in the focus on space starting on January 11, 2007. That's when the People's Republic of China, or the PRC, decided to conduct an unannounced launch of a modified version of the DF-21. This is a two-stage, road-mobile, solid-fuel, medium-range ballistic missile, or what we classify as Space Command as a direct ascent anti-satellite. So this ASAT was aimed at a single interoperable meteorological satellite system known as the Fengyan-1. This was in the sun synchronous orbit at an altitude of 9,000 kilometers. So upon impact, the ASAT kinetic kill vehicle, or the KKV, would produce over 3,000 pieces of trackable debris, as well as over 32,000 smaller pieces of untrackable debris. So there's a lot of stuff that's going on up there. So that act created a mess up in space. So much of that, of course, still remains in orbit today. Though it caught the world off guard, this event would be more than just a running headline on the evening news channels. It would trigger a whole paradigm shift. Like it's Wild Wild West up there. What are the rules of engagements? Can anybody just do anything up there? So we had to pan out a little bit. So this was a new modern warfare, transitioning the space environment from a benign existence to one of congestion, competitiveness, and with the potential to host armed conflict. So the year following China's first ASAT test, we saw a proliferation of space systems by strategic competitors, such as the PRC, Russia, and there was also, as we all know now, a growing commercial space market and a hope to extend human presence to the moon and beyond. This is why space today stands as an equal operational domain alongside land, air, sea, and cyber. So, on August 29, 2019, U.S. Space Command was reborn. So we're getting ready to celebrate our 5th birthday this year. But, you know, like I said, there's the rising threats in this nascent domain. So with the mission of working with allies and partners to plan, execute, and integrate military space power into multi-domain global operations to deter aggression, defend national interests, and when necessary, defeat threats. We at Space Command are committed to ensuring our motto, there's never a day without space. I'm just saying. You know, and this is more than just a cliche or something that you put on T-shirts. No, this is, it's continuous vigilance and responsive, active in a domain that encompasses both ground-based and space-based assets. So who knows what our AOR is? What's Space Command's area of operations, of responsibility? Yeah, it is up. In fact, it's the largest of all combatant commands. It starts at 100 kilometers above mean sea level and stretching beyond, right? That is our area of operations. So when you think about it, I mean, because it could be in the Indo-Pacific, it could be over in Yukon, but if it's up there, that is our combatant command domain. So as you can see, with all those complexities and the things that I mentioned, there are a lot of challenges. I remember when I first got there, I was just like, well, what are the rules of engagement in space? Great question. So that's why we're here. So understand, that since humankind's inception into space in the late 50s, our way of life has become interwoven with space capabilities. And as you know, space has evolved far beyond the realms of initial telecommunication, needs and desires for scientific exploration. It encompasses a wide array of systems, from GPS, from navigation, from weather monitoring, and intelligence gathering satellites. So additionally, the dependence of military forces and civilian infrastructure on space-based assets has grown exponentially, rendering space systems not only a strategic asset, but also as vulnerable targets in times of conflict. So, from the power grid to the traffic lights, the worldwide banking systems, and of course, the internet, securing space systems is not an option for our nation. It is imperative. It is imperative. That is why, to support and enable U.S. Space Command in its mission, the nation, in its wisdom, saw fit to create another military service. And they are focused solely on organizing, training, and equipping personnel and capabilities to secure the nation's interests in and through space. So on December 20th, 2019, the U.S. Space Force was created. This was our nation's sixth military service. Like I said, it gets confused sometimes with Space Command, but the Space Force and those mighty guardians are their own entity, but work closely, of course, with Space Command and other service components and joint component commands, allies, and partners, of course, to deter aggression in space. Because that's the fight is real. The fight is real. On the other side, as a proud sailor and naval officer, let me speak to the symbiotic relationship between space and mission area that's near and dear to my heart: information warfare. As sailors and as leaders, we understand that the seas are not the only battlegrounds where our Navy must excel. The digital domain has become equally significant, if not more, in shaping the outcomes of conflict and securing our nation's interests. In this rapidly evolving landscape, our adversaries are not just ships and submarines. They are also hackers, cyber terrorists, satellites, hostile states seeking to disrupt our very way of life. Naval information warfare encompasses a broad spectrum of capabilities, from cyber warfare to electronic warfare, from signals intelligence to information operations. It's about leveraging technology and intelligence to gain the upper hand, to outmaneuver our adversaries. You know, a lot of times you get a gun, I get a bigger gun. No, we got to learn how to outmaneuver our adversaries in this domain. And of course, to protect our interests at home and abroad. Our mission is clear: to defend our networks, to safeguard our critical infrastructure, and to ensure the integrity of communications. But it is not just about defense. It's also about offense. It is about taking the fight to the enemy's doorstep, disrupting their operations, and denying them the ability to threaten our security. To succeed in this mission, we must be agile, adaptive, and innovative. I remember this morning listening to the 10th Fleet Commander, Admiral Clapperton, and he talked about having that redundancy, being able to be resilient. That's the mindset that we need to be in. I often tell everybody, you know what, I want to be left of boom in this domain. I want industry to help me look at those capabilities that look at precursor behaviors and anomalies so that we can, get in front of something from a proactive standpoint instead of reacting. That's the domain in which we are fighting in. Those are some of the challenges that we have. So We must stay ahead of the curve, embracing emerging technologies and exploring new ways to exploit the information environment. We must invest in our people, the war fighters. Art CNO was very clear. She said, war fighting, war fighters, and foundation. We need to provide them with the training tools and resources they need to excel in this dynamic and challenging domain. So having said that, my information warriors, we've undergone a transformation of our own. No longer confined to traditional methods of propaganda and physiological operations, it has embraced space. The integration of information warfare with space operations forms a nexus that has profound implications for our national security. One of the key aspects of this relationship is the vulnerability of space-based assets to cyber attacks. Satellites are crucial for communication, surveillance, and reconnaissance. You know, they are susceptible, as we know, to hacking and jamming, thereby disrupting vital military and civilian functions. So, imagine a scenario where the nation's GPS system is compromised or its satellite communications network is paralyzed. The impact on military operations and everyday life would be substantial. Furthermore, the dual use of nature of space assets introduces ambiguity and challenges in distinguishing between, is this peaceful? Is this hostile? What activities are what? Satellites are designed for civilian purposes, can quickly be repurposed for military objectives. This blurring of lines adds a layer of complexity to international relationships, making it imperative for nations to develop robust strategies to also safeguard their interests in space. So it's not just a us problem, it's a our problem. It's a big problem. The weaponization of information in space operations is another facet that demands attention. Disinformation campaigns targeting satellite communications can mislead military commanders, creating confusion and potentially altering the course of conflicts. So by manipulating satellite data or communication signals, this can also lead to miscalculations and unintended consequences that highlight the need for advanced cybersecurity measures in space systems. I'm saying that out loud. In response to these challenges, the nation must invest in the development, I'll say it again, of resilient and secure space architectures. This involves not only the technological advances I mentioned, but also international cooperation and the formulation of norms and treaties to govern behavior in space. Remember, I talked about those rules of engagement. The establishment of rules of engagements and protocols for responding to space-based threats is essential to prevent the escalation of conflicts into the extraterrestrial domain. So I'm a little passionate about this because I have a bird's eye view. And before I got to Space Command, I was like, ooh, I can't wait. I'm going to get there. You're going to see me. I'm going up in space. But now I'm like, no, I'm not going up there. No. But I know what we need to do to make sure we protect things in space. Our new commanding general, General Whiting, he's known for stating that cybersecurity is the soft underbelly of space operations. In saying this, he affirms the close relationship between space operations and information warfare. Focusing the command on setting clear objectives and key results, General Whiting is posturing Space Command on 5 proposed focus areas, which are easy, you remember these: mission readiness, space superiority, mission integrity, and building the coalition. And also shaping the future for all of us to drive the train. So with Space Command's Joint Component Command and Service Component Commands to include Navy Space Command, as you heard that Admiral Clapperton is in charge of, and our very own maritime space and maritime cyber warfare officers, we, the Navy, are directly a part of the fight in space and helping Space Command to integrate information warfare into space operations. That's the warfare area that we are in. Our highest priority is to preserve freedom of action in space. And our moral responsibility is ensuring delivery of space capabilities to Joint Force to enable all domain dominance, to protect the Joint Force from space-enabled attack, and to lead and win the space fight by achieving space superiority. Space services are key enablers of industry, critical infrastructure. I know, I done said a lot. You're like, are you preaching up here? No, I'm just a little passionate about this. And this is the right people in this setting to get after these challenges. So, in closing, I'll say this. The relationship between information warfare and space operations is a critical aspect of contemporary security dynamics. As we navigate the complexities of this interconnected landscape, it is incumbent upon us to recognize the challenges and opportunities that it presents. So address the vulnerabilities, foster international collaboration, develop comprehensive strategies. We can strive to ensure the peaceful and secure use of space for the benefit of all of us. Thank you. You got to be motivated. Come on. I'll know by the questions that I get asked. Please feel free. I know enough about space to be a little dangerous.
Hey, I'm Todd Dudley from XStar Satellite Communications. Great brief. Appreciate your enthusiasm and great to see Navy leadership at the top of the COCOM chain here. Space Command is an interesting thing from a traditional warfighting perspective. Obviously, we haven't had a COCOM in space until obviously recently. Right. And warfighting requirements have traditionally been pushed forth from the geographic, combatant commanders. Is there a long-term plan to deconflict those warfighting requirements so that Space Command takes a certain defined subset? How does the geographic COCOM commander help you fight the war in space?
No, that's a great question. So one, definitely got to be demanding customers, right? And remember I told you where our AOR is. But if there's something that happens in INDOPACOM or in EUCOM, what's that C2 look like? These are things that, we get a chance to run through these scenarios in certain war games to kind of, test that out. But no, you're absolutely right. We're working on that. Because like I said, there's some blurred lines there because, that's command. No, I'm going to make that call. Wait a minute. This is in my backyard. I'm going to make that call. So, who's supporting, who's supported? Those are the things that we are working through right now. So great question, but it's one that, there can't be any ambiguity there because the enemy gets a vote. So.
Afternoon, Admiral. My name is Zachary Shulman. I'm with the U.S. Coast Guard's Office of Emerging Policy. I run the Futures Program for the service. You talked a lot about a Wild West. There's ambiguity. There's a lot of grayness, and space is not binary. It's highly digital, but not binary. One of the problems that we're grasping with is the reliance of the nation for space for, as we all know, the wide variety of activities for our national and economic security. There's no domain governance. There's domain warfighters, there's specialized organizations, but there's no national coordinator and there's no international set of rules. Like, the closest in our mind, the closest lived experience in human history is in the maritime, where there is an international agreement on what the rules of behavior are. And then, I promise there's a question on this. It's in our interaction with the industry, they feel like they're desperate. Industry is desperate for some sort of guidance, there's no agreed set, if you enter an intersection, everyone knows you hit a stop sign, who goes first in that intersection. There's no rules in space for that. So I ask you, do you feel like the lack of a coordinated domain governance entity or even playbook is a security risk for the country? And if so, who should take that lead?
No, that's a great question too. I mean, it is an issue, right? Remember I said Wild Wild West up there. I mean, look at Pelio. Look at what's getting launched up there all over the place, right? Excuse me. Like I said, it's one of those domains where okay, I'm combatant command, but we do have to have governance. So those are also conversations that we're having right now. Because we owe you that. We owe you that. Hey, this is what right looks like. And it goes back to the thing that I said about rules of engagement, right, in space. Like, when is something seen as provocative? How much, is enough? And we've been, struggling with, some jamming and some things like that. So we're right now we're working on those actual rules and that governance piece that you're looking at. But Space Command will take the lead on a lot of that. Of course, we'll work with Space Force, which, that's the force that is there to do man, train, equip, and put those things in motion as with their type commanders. So, no, great question. It is difficult, but that's something we definitely are getting after. Thank you very much.
Admiral, good to see you again, ma'am. Thank you.
You as well.
Thanks for coming out. So with Space Command as a COCOM and, of course, Space Force, well, within the Department of the Navy, there's still plenty of space work to be done across what seems to be all spheres, surface, sub, shore commands. The fight covers almost the entirety of the Navy. And so I think my question for you, ma'am, is what are ways that we can find across the force in maybe non-traditional fields? How do we get more people to be thinking about what can this person do in terms of supporting the space effort? I know I've heard about like space cadre is an aspect of what we do.
Yeah.
How do we get the word to the other subsections of the fleet that they can actually play a role with Space Command?
Well, I will tell you, that is Nav Space's role, and that is what Admiral Clapperton, that's why he's our component command. So under Space Com, we have Nav Space. And I'm going to tell you, 10th Fleet is not bashful with about letting us know, hey, here's what we need. Here's how we need to get the word out. Of course, now we have maritime space officers, and there's going to be some opportunities here in the future to have more billets at Space Command. But that service element is the one that will actually be vocal in getting that out to the fleet. Here's how you can help, Space Command. But that's I'm glad that you're thinking about that. Because we need to make sure, that's why I'm here talking about this right now, because everybody's got a little piece of this and everybody cares about it because, like I said, there's never a day without space. So we need to make sure everybody knows their role. So great.
So Admiral, thank you for speaking to us. We got a bunch of mentees, young people in high school and college. What should I be encouraging them to think about studying, to going into in order to address the future, which is now, which is space? What areas of study, what are your shortages? What's the thing that you don't have nearly enough of that you need to get people through that pipeline?
No, that's great. See, I tell everybody, first, look up because there is a lot to learn. And I tell you, I am around some rocket scientists, really, every day. And it's funny because often it'll be me that asks that little question that nobody's thinking about, right? Because everybody else is, head way up here. So sometimes we need, basic space operations. Look at, rocket scientists. There's, in the whole STEM realm, there are just so many aspects to it. So getting that foundation and that's why I will be visiting, I'm going back to Columbus, Ohio this summer, and I get a chance to, visit some of the schools and just talk about, some of the specialties, some of the skill sets, mainly in basic space operations, but most of them are in that STEM field because I think we don't need a bunch of rocket scientists. We need others that can also look across and see this problem set, from another perspective, but having that strong, I would say, STEM background would be helpful. But if you have any thoughts and ideas and where you see, hey, here's the bouquet of things that people need to learn, we can probably drill that down more and say, hey, this is probably the skill set that I think is lacking. So right now, I think we got a good complement of various space experts in Space Command from like all the different services. Of course, we got Space Force. Then we have, a lot of the Army, that are really good on trans-regional missile defense. So we've got like a good makeup. But yeah, what is that one Achilles or one thing that we probably need to focus on? I'd have to look at that and get you a better answer. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks. That's great, though.
Hello, ma'am. My name is Kelly McConnell. I currently work for Booz Allen Hamilton, but I was a former MAGTF space officer, I guess, in the Marine Corps as a secondary MOS. I was just interested to understand your perception of what is the role of the maritime space officer. What do they do, and how do they kind of connect the fleet to the space-based capabilities that exist?
Great question. Do we have one here? Hey, would you like to stand up and kind of talk about that?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lieutenant Commander Tillis. I'm a maritime space officer. I was a surface warfare officer for 12 years. I was a CSO on a ship before I lat transferred, so I'm used to working with satellite assets. Most of the Space Force is composed of people prior in the Air Force who aren't necessarily familiar with what Navy ships need. We usually use the acronym WIMPS for weather intelligence, meteorological, and other things like that. So for us, I'm specializing in liaisoning with the Space Force and making sure that we get the space resources that ships need. My tour, specifically next tour, is going to be in Stuttgart, Germany, so I'll be working at the GIST, the Joint Integrated Space Team. So essentially, you'll have EUCOM, you'll have his intelligence advisor, he'll have a space intelligence advisor, and that person's going to be my boss. And I'll make sure that the space intelligence person understands what the ships specifically need with regards to space assets. Speaking from my background as a surface warfare officer, we never receive formal training in space. If you haven't studied it in your undergraduate or postgraduate, it's just not something you're very familiar with. You just know when SHF is down. And that's about the extent of it. So the hope is that we're able to provide more information for that.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for that, Lieutenant Commander. That was excellent. That is excellent. Yes, and we're refining that. Like I said, we're looking at different billets and things to introduce the MSOs to in Space Command, and we're looking throughout, where should we plant them with that expertise. It's an opportunity because we're growing this right now and developing it. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Ma'am, Indira Donegan, Chief Technology Evangelist from Red River. Your passion, your fire, it's super motivating, especially later on towards the day here as we're all gearing up for some happy hour fun after this. I spent 2 weeks ago down in LA. I went to the CJADC2 forum, and the services were really well represented there, as well as General Cropsey, who was there all day talking to everyone. But Space Force and Space Command, it wasn't really highlighted or really showcased there, and I was wondering, just with your naval background on the ABMS portion of JADC2 and now what they're doing with the combined joint piece of that, where do you see Space Command kind of fitting in there, or what are you guys driving, or what's most important to you in that particular vein?
No, that's a great question, because I tell you, we are definitely connected. In fact, I spent some time talking to Admiral Breyer Joyner, who is leading that charge there in the Pentagon. I would like to think, we kind of, when you look at that all domain, the whole challenge of it. Remember, I talked about domain dominance. So I want to make sure that we're leaning forward on those space pieces. And they're so vast. There's so many of those things. And, of course, a lot of it is in another classification level. But, from everything, from making sure that we protect and defend, making sure that we have resiliency in space, that's all a part of that. And that's what we're kind of chiming in on. But no, we are connected. So, and we look for those opportunities because, like I said, space is kind of everywhere, and but there's never a day without it. So, thank you.
Anybody else?
Oh, yeah.
Admiral Oscar Simmons, U.S. Forces, Japan. In my theater, I've seen adversaries that like to push the lines and boundaries, create islands out of nowhere in order to create a position and leverage against us. With space, and going back to the guidance question, and the kind of sometimes lack of guidance or lack of even international policy, what are we doing to counter the levers that our adversaries are making in the space realm?
Yeah, well, I can't go into a lot of that, but I'll tell you that's one of the things. And as I read what General Whiting was focusing us on, so mission readiness, space superiority, mission integration, and building the coalition. So, like I mentioned earlier, when is enough, right? So yes, we've definitely got to make sure we have those governance rules, but we also need to make sure that we're leaning to the left. Remember, I talked about those things that we need to do left of boom so we can be able to predict more on what the enemy is trying to do so that we're not just reacting. So looking at a lot of the proactive measures to make sure, we have that resiliency and that we're focused on, hey, there's something out there, but here's something that we can do to either outmaneuver or to make things a little more resilient. But no, your head's in the right direction. We are not silent on the net there.
Anybody else? All right. Admiral, thank you very much.
If you're ever in Colorado, come visit. Thank you.
And that concludes our program for today here in the Information Warfare Pavilion.